Got it? Subsiders? How are you? Pretty good. Good, me too. How you doing? Pretty good. You, all right, it's 2 o'clock. So let's begin our very last lecture of the semester. That's exciting. This is the last time you have to listen to me for 60 minutes. And then you'll have to listen to each other. All right. So we'll talk about our very last topic, control, as our fourth function of management. We've talked about planning, organizing, and leading so far. Controlling is the very last function. All right, go ahead and get that attendance submitted if you haven't. I actually want to start off with something we discussed on Tuesday about social media. Chapter 15, we talked about downsides of social media. So I have a couple Instagram reels I want to show y'all and get your opinion, if you can see some trends here. Make sure it plays first. All right. All right, that's our first. Before we discuss, I'm going to show you the second one. Have you noticed any similarities so far, aside from the topic itself? What's that? What'd you say, Mark? All right, that's a long one, but I think we've seen enough of that one. All right, here's two more that I couldn't show you because the comments are pretty vulgar. See any similarities between these videos aside from the topic itself? I don't care about the topic. What are the similarities in the videos? Yeah, Eric? Yeah, they're disagreeing. What do you say, Mari? They're all in a classroom. Do you see any similarities in the classroom? Look at the background here. Now look at that map. And let's go back to the first video. Let's watch the first video again. It's the same background. We're in the same classroom. All four videos were filmed in the same room. What do y'all think that means? What's the takeaway here? They're scripted. Right. So how does that represent a downside of or a danger of social media? Yes. Don't believe everything you see. What else? You can make anyone look bad. This isn't about gender identity or sexual orientation or politics at all. The point is you can make anybody look bad. So what's the consequence of this? A video is like this. Yeah, it's very misleading. This is an example of what we might call fake news. A couple of key takeaways. Posts like this they go viral because they elicit strong emotions. So the first video, like you might agree with one side or the other, and by watching someone who's in a heated debate about what they think is the right thing to do, it engages your emotions and it makes you invested in that video. Then you share it with your friends. The second thing, that it gives us different straw man examples. You know what a straw man is? It's like when you paint the other side, your opponent, as like you overemphasize their weaknesses, you make them look dumb, you make their point look invalid so that you can feel like you're winning the argument. It's like, well, of course I'm right because you believe this. As abortion as an example, I can pick both sides. I can say, if you're pro-choice, you're a baby killer. If you're pro-life, you're against women's rights. So I can paint both sides as the bad person and straw man their argument in that way. So the same thing's happening in this video. And there's multiple videos in that classroom from both perspectives. And the idea is that it allows us to say like, well, of course I'm right. I can feel a lot more comfortable in my beliefs because look how stupid the other side is. Like, look how aggressive that teacher was. That's not cool. Of course we should support that kid. The downside of having straw man is that they're not realistic representations. Like, how often do you think situations like that unfold in the average classroom? Probably very rarely. They might, but it paints the portrait for viewers of social media that it's way more common, and that causes more divisiveness. My last takeaway here is that fake news like this can create more divisiveness because it makes us angry about things that really aren't super realistic or super common. So my friend found a bunch of these reels yesterday and sent them to me, and we had a lot of interesting debate about like who could be making these videos. I don't know, but it only has negative consequences. So all that to say, we've got like family holidays coming up where you're going to be sitting down with your crazy aunts and uncles with conspiracy theories and radical political ideas. So the best thing you can do is try to help them understand that not everything online is true. I'll give you a personal example. My aunt called when I first moved to Chicago. This is like during the pandemic. She lives in Kentucky. And it was during the riots. She's like, Alex, I hope you're staying inside. I hope you lock your doors. I hope you're safe. I heard they're killing people up there. I was like, Anna, no one's died. I was like, oh, let me guess, are you watching Fox News? She's like, yes, I'm watching Fox News. And they said they're killing people up here. No, it's not happening. So I love my aunt. But in that situation, she was misguided by news. So I thought that was an interesting example. Moving to chapter 16 now. Well, actually, let's do some good things first. All right. I think Brigitte, is that how you pronounce it? She has an internship. Is she here today? Yeah. Congrats. Seems like a pretty sweet internship. Did I say your name right? Brigitte? All right. New job and a new raise. Who's got a new job coming up? Nice job. And Norelli. Norelli is killing it at this job. She's got like a promotion and a raise all this semester, so nice job. Two cool trips coming up. Bethany and Arlette going to Mexico and Orlando, so that's cool. Have fun. Juan is still okay. And Teresa's also happy, so good for Teresa. And Rabisha got a new car. What kind of car did you get? Nice. All right. Very good. Congrats. All right. So those are the good things. Let's talk about learning objectives for today. So we'll talk about control as a function of management, our fourth function of management. We'll talk about the process of control, types of control, ways that managers can control the organization. TQM, total quality management, is a form of control. And then we'll discuss some contemporary issues. All right. So this is, again, our last function of management. So controlling is seeing that the right things happen at the right time. Let's talk about why we need control. There's 6 reasons we might need control. So we might be adapting to change and uncertainty. We might be discovering irregularities and errors. Control allows us to monitor things and make sure that any errors get corrected before they spiral out of control. We can reduce costs, increase productivity, or add value. So like by controlling the efficiency of our productions, we can decrease costs and be more efficient overall. We can detect opportunities and increase innovation. Provide performance feedback. That's one of our functions as a leader, is to give people feedback on how they're doing. And a part of that is monitoring, like, all right, if I expected you to do this in the past year, here's how you measured up, and then here's how we can do better. That's part of the control process. And then, interestingly, the book says that the 6th reason is to decentralize decision-making and facilitate teamwork. When I first read that, it didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Does that make sense to y'all? I tend to think of control as like asserting control, like establishing dominance, guiding things. How do y'all see that influencing the decentralization process and facilitating decision-making? Mike? Ooh, I like that. So you're saying like maybe appoint some leaders within the team to oversee how they do things? Yeah, I like that idea a lot. I don't know if you heard what Mike said. It was good. He said if we can facilitate like control by decentralizing command, perhaps by letting teams self-manage as an example, that might be one way that I facilitate like a controlled design, but I'm taking a step back and letting the team function by itself. That could create innovation. We've talked about how having an autonomous team can make them more innovative before. So I like that. All right, whatever reason it is, the ultimate goal of control, this will be a final exam question. I can promise you that. Everyone looks up now. Yes, the purpose of control is, oh, sorry, we're not to that slide yet. I'll remind you when we get to that slide. It is for sustaining success, and we'll explain that more descriptively in a couple slides, and that will be the final exam question. Don't let me forget. Here's a nice figure that represents our 6 reasons for control. You can save that for when you study. Let's talk about the steps in the control process and types of control. Before we show the steps, does anybody want to guess how many steps are in this process? If you're going to take a wild guess. Yeah, Amari's got it. How many steps have been in all our processes so far? There've been 4. So the same is true with control. Our 4 steps are establish standards, measure performance, compare performance to standards, and then take corrective action if necessary. So questions we're asking ourselves when we establish standards, what is our desired outcome? Like, what are we trying to measure up to? Then we measure how we did. So what is the actual outcome that we got? And we compare the two. So based on where we wanted to be, how close did we get? And then if there's a large discrepancy, we take action to fix it. I like this figure better. This figure is a good graphic representation of our 4 steps. And as always, our 4 steps loop back on each other. After we take action, we perform for the next go about, maybe revise our standards for round 2. I've added in descriptors up here for y'all. If we think of step 1 is establishing our desired performance and step 2 is our actual performance, we subtract the 2, and that gives us our performance discrepancy. So if I wanted to achieve a 10 out of 10 on sales and I got a 7 out of 10 on sales, whatever those numbers mean, then my discrepancy was 3 out of 10. Based on that discrepancy, I take some action to reduce the discrepancy. Obviously, I want to meet my goals in the future, so I'll do something to improve whatever my actual performance was. Cool. All right. Here is a nice graphic of measuring our performance. This is a control chart, and in this example, they're measuring the number of pages they read each night. Their goal is to read 55 pages, but they set the upper and lower limit. So we say, okay, 55 is a goal, but as long as they hit 35, that's fine. And 75 is kind of this upper limit. And we can track progress over time. And if we exceed or fall below our upper and lower limits, that tells us that something is going not as planned. Probably you're more concerned about being below your lower limit. So let's say, okay, I read 33 pages tonight. Like that's not as much as I should have. So tomorrow I'll add an extra half hour to read more. In this situation, probably reading too many pages isn't a big deal if you're studying, but if it's like a production line and you overproduce, you might want to see like, okay, we overproduce, that's great, but like what caused us to overproduce? Can we check it out? Maybe there was some anomaly that happened today, but let's just investigate that either way. As long as things stay between these 2 lines, then we're going to keep coasting. We'll assume everything's pretty good. Okay, let's talk about types of control. We have 3 labels that are not super important: concurrent, feedback, and feed forward. Have y'all heard of feed forward control? It's a very weird term. I think researchers invented it and they're trying to get business practitioners to use it. We tend to think of feedback in we say the word feedback, but in their terms, it means reflective feedback. So we're reflecting on prior performance. This might come in the form of an end of the year evaluation where I say, based on the last 12 months, you were deficient in this, you did really good in this. That's feedback. If we're in the present moment, that would be concurrent control. I think maybe an example that comes to mind for me is if you watch the show, I Like the Bear. Y'all seen that? I've only seen a couple episodes, so no spoilers. But things are like pretty hectic in the kitchen and the chef is yelling orders. If things are screwed up, he's yelling at the person screwing up. That's very concurrent because it's like real-time feedback on what's going on. I think the book gives an example of word processor catching your spelling mistakes. Like in real time, that's concurrent. And then feed forward is when we're focusing on future performance. So it's more of like, all right, we learned this lesson today. Let's apply that because we got this, I don't know, something coming up we need to prepare for. If you stick with a restaurant example, has anyone worked like front of house in a restaurant before? Server, host? Okay, that was most of my jobs in high school. My first job was Red Lobster. We did sometimes a pre-shift. That's a pretty common practice in restaurants where before the shift starts, the manager sits down with the whole staff, front of house like servers and greeters, and they'll say, all right, today we've got like 3 big parties coming in, so we need to prep. Like, here's how we're going to facilitate these tables in this section and XYZ. So it's more of like thinking ahead, how are we going to prepare for success? Here's the test question. Regardless, if you're concurrent, feedback, or feed forward, the goal is to achieve and maintain desired performance levels. So regardless if it's reflective or proactive. One takeaway though is that, and I think the reason they separate them is in 3 separate terms, is that in general, one of them tends to be better. Can y'all see which one of these 3 might be better in general? Feedback, concurrent, or feed forward? Feedback? Anyone think anything else? Concurrent? Yeah, it always depends. Would anyone think feed forward? Rabisha? Why do you say that? Yeah, I agree with you. This is my personal opinion, by the way. I can see arguments for both feedback and concurrent. The research, I think the reason they coined the label feed forward is because they're still talking about the same feedback y'all are talking about, but they're saying when you're given that concurrent or backwards feedback, still try to have some future focus so that employees know, like, in the future, we can apply this to improve our performance. So whatever style you're using, if you can have some kind of future focus, that will definitely help employees apply the feedback. Okay. Let's talk about a lot of different control perspectives. So the balanced scorecard, that has 4 perspectives on it: the financial, customer, internal business, innovation and learning. So we'll talk about each of those, and then strategy mapping. So let's look at the balanced scorecard first. So this is a visual representation of our scorecard. We have 4 basically categories that we're going to evaluate ourselves on as a business. So we'll assess our success on financial performance or financial perspective, then customer perspective, internal business perspective, and innovation and learning perspective. The numbers are irrelevant. The idea is that we're evaluating 4 different aspects of our business. And one of the ways it's been described is like in the cockpit of a plane, they say you don't rely on one instrument to know like your altitude or your location. You have multiple instruments. And the same is true for these multiple perspectives that we're going to evaluate our company on. We can't just evaluate our success based on financials. We could have a very financially successful business, but our customers hate us. And that's obviously not as good as if we're good at all 4 perspectives. One of the reasons this is so effective is the saying that we've used before: what gets measured gets done. So if as a business you're measuring your success, like you're writing it on paper and saying, here's our goal for success and here's how we met that success or how we did not meet it, then it tends to make you motivated to achieve success. Let's look at the financial perspective first. So a couple things we look at to evaluate our financial success: budgets, financial statements, and financial ratios. We're probably, well, there's a lot of finance majors in here, huh? Let me see your hand if you're a finance major. Yeah, that's like one of the most popular majors in the School of Business or College of Business. So y'all might be more familiar with this than I am. Finance is not my background. But in general, there are a few ways we can look at success. Budget's probably the one we're most familiar with. That's like we're going to budget for our next year's financials in terms of how much money we have to spend, how we're going to spend it, and then hopefully we stay within that budget. Financial statements might just be a summary of finances. And financial ratios are probably some of the most commonly cited when we talk about like return on investment. That's a pretty popular ratio that people use to determine if a business is doing well. And there are a few pretty popular examples that the book provides for us: the current ratio, asset turnover ratio, and return on investment ratio. We mentioned ROI already. Here's the equation for return on investment. Okay, so if your net income is greater, if you're basically making money on your investments, you have a high ROI. If not, then you're spending a lot of money not to make a lot of money. The takeaway here is that we can measure financial success in different ways. Like if you think about the housing bubble, the housing crisis in the early 2000s, that was a result of really poor loans that banks offered. So banks looked great on paper until people defaulted on loans, and then those liabilities came back to bite them in the butt. So they tanked as a result. Okay, that's all we'll say about financials. Let's move on to the customer perspective. So this is perspective number 2. A couple questions we want to ask ourselves. Are customers satisfied? And do we have customer retention? So do customers keep coming back to us? And there's a couple things we can do, but I want to ask y'all, in general, what are some best strategies for keeping customers satisfied and retained? What do y'all think? If you think about businesses you keep going back to, why do you keep going back to those businesses? Eileen? Sorry? Yeah, they're friendly, good customer service. What else? Prices, yeah, especially in college. A lot of times you got to go with what's cheapest. What else? Rebecca? What's up? Yeah, accessibility is pretty big. Yeah. What kind of deals they got, really? Yeah, like how quality is their product or service? Yeah, so those are all good reasons. In general, we want to be good at those things to retain our customers. Full recommendations from the book here. The first is to be clear about what customers can expect. Try to, if anything, under-promise and over-deliver. The opposite is the worst thing you can do. If you over-promise and under-deliver, if you set expectations really high and then you let people down, that looks worse than if you just met expectations to begin with. Even better is if you can under-promise slightly. Obviously, you don't want to under-promise so much that people don't become a customer. But if you can surprise people by over-delivering, that goes a long way. Go the extra mile and deliver a personalized experience. Have you ever been to Ruth's Chris Steakhouse? That's one of my favorite places to eat. It's pretty expensive, but if you get a chance, go there. What's interesting is that at the Ruth's Chris in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, if you went there one time, they would take notes on, like, what do you order? What were the things that you liked and didn't like? And then the next time you go back, like, let's say you ordered a salad and last time you complained because there were too many onions. Then the next time you order the salad and the server asks you, oh, do you want less onions this time? And they're able to do that because they take notes in the computer and they print out a ticket for each table when they sit down. So the server, even if they don't know you, they have a ticket that says, like, all right, Alex doesn't like onions. So if you ask for a salad with onions, tell them you can get less onions. And that's pretty cool from the customer's perspective because it really shows, like, it's a personalized experience that creates a better service all around. All right, I think the book uses Ritz-Carlton as an example. They're also obviously really high end. Okay. Look at next, the internal business perspective. A couple questions here. We got to reflect on productivity, efficiency, quality, and safety. And all of them are important. We can't sacrifice one for the other. Which of these do you think tends to get sacrificed the most? Yeah. Yeah, Mari said safety. That's probably what I would agree with. A lot of businesses want to have, like, a good product that's cheap and like has a good profit, and sometimes they compromise safety. That's why OSHA is such a big deal. But let's talk about these 4 real quick. So if we are productive, the book gives us an equation of inputs over outputs. So if I'm able to produce more with less, that means I'm more productive than somebody who produces the same with the same amount of input. That kind of gets at efficiency. So if you're more efficient with your resources, obviously you're going to produce more than the other person. But productivity, more generally speaking, is about how much can you output. Okay, and then obviously, I think Norelli said this, you have to be quality. So people aren't going to come be your customer if your product sucks. And then last, we should be safety minded. This is both in terms of employees, like we're not abusing our staff, but also in terms of environmental regulations. So Chicago in the early 1900s was really bad about dumping stuff in the river. Have y'all ever done the riverboat tour? I would highly recommend it. Very cool. One of the interesting things I learned is that because they were polluting the lake so much, they just reversed the flow of the river and sent it to St. Louis. So that sucks for St. Louis, but it's great for Chicago. Okay. Question for y'all. What are some ways we can know if we're being productive? If you can think back to the strategic management chapter a couple weeks ago. Connor? Yeah, so we can just look at the like quantitative data. That's one way. How do we know? Like, let's say we feel like we're doing good. Is there some other standard we can measure ourselves against? Really? Oh yeah. Yeah, I hadn't even thought of that. That's a good one. So some organizations survey customers. That's a great way to get feedback. Connor? Others. Ooh. Yeah, exactly. That's the term I was looking for. So benchmarking is we say like, all right, if we're Spirit Airlines, I want to compare myself against other airlines because I feel like I'm doing good, but how are they doing? All right. One other example, we can follow best practices. Most industries have industry standards. There's really kind of two levels of criteria for what our organization needs to do to be compliant or to be doing the right thing. There's regulations, which say like by law, we have to do these things. That's important. But then there's also sometimes industry standards that exceed laws. It's like, for example, with the pool industry, the regulation is like you have to have one lifeguard for your pool. But maybe the industry standard says, oh, we should have two per pool. So it's like a higher standard. And if you're the only organization not doing that, and all your competitors are doing that, then it's harder for you to be successful. So you should know your industry standards and follow those. All right, so that's the internal business perspective. Next up is the last of the four. So innovation and learning perspective. Are we equipped for continued value and improvement? If you think of the types of organizations, do you remember the learning organization from like week 2 or 3? It's the kind of organization that prioritizes development and continuous growth. It's very similar to this perspective here. There's 4 focuses, employee attitudes, employee turnover, capabilities, and culture. So we're asking ourselves questions like, are the employees happy? Do they appear motivated? Is their well-being fulfilled? Remember, if people have good attitudes about their job, then they're more likely to work harder and be loyal to the company and be good, like pleasant to work with. Are they turning over? So do we have employees constantly leaving the organization? If we can't keep someone more than 2 months, that's an indication that we're doing something wrong. There is also an example the book provides of good turnover. So I forget the exact terminology, but there's like productive turnover and unproductive turnover. How do y'all think turnover can be a good thing for an organization? Like, why would it be good to lose some employees? Really? Yeah, that's true. That's sad for the people that got fired. But yeah, I guess overall that's good for the organization. Any other ways it could be beneficial? Raisha? Yeah, that's definitely true. Sometimes we need to trim the fat, so to speak. There's a term called churn in HR literature, and it's like, does the organization churn employees? And if we have like 5 to 10% of our staff leave every year, that can be a good thing because we get some fresh perspective. Like Raisha said, we lose the people that we didn't want to begin with. So a little bit of turnover is good because it keeps our staff fresh. But if we have too much turnover, then that's bad because for one thing, it's really expensive to train new employees. It's also tough if you're losing half your staff every year to maintain like the standards of doing things, the culture that you have. That's tough when you have a lot of turnover. All right. Resource capabilities. Do people have what they need to be successful? And then org culture. We talked a lot about culture already. A whole chapter actually. But this perspective is all about like we've already talked about financials and our business processes. Those look good. Our customers are happy. the thing that organizations tend to neglect is like looking inside and seeing, are their employees also happy? And this perspective helps you get at that. All right. This is a duplicate slide. And this is just a review of the four scorecards, and just to show that we evaluate all four of these things, and they're all important. So, okay. I debated deleting this next slide because it's a lot of information, but I think it has some interesting takeaways, some important takeaways here. So these are our four scorecards, just put in like hierarchical order. So financial goals, customer goals, internal processes, and learning and growth. The same four scorecards. What's different now is that we've put them in some sort of visual representation of how the org goals cascade. So remember, we talked about cascading in terms of the CEO or the board, they set the goals, and then that trickles down the organization. This is kind of showing the opposite, how if we facilitate learning and growth goals, for example, if we foster employee capabilities and attitudes, then they work harder, then we see better operational outcomes, and that can lead to operational excellence, which can lead to productivity growth, which can lead to shareholder value. So it's just connecting the dots between the different scorecards to show how they all relate. That's all it is. So don't spend time trying to memorize this for the final exam. That would be a waste of time. But question here, what is this chart useful for showing us? Like, why would this be good to show a CEO? What does this tell us about leadership in general? Like, yeah, like how complicated this process is. There's a lot of moving parts here. That's true. Was that kind of the point you were making? Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, it takes a lot to reach the goal of shareholder value. Anything else? What could it tell us about motivating staff? I'm going to show you. Let's jump to this slide and then we'll jump back. I want to show you this definition of leadership we discussed maybe 2 weeks ago. That it's the process of influencing others to understand and agree, and to facilitate individual and collective efforts towards shared objectives. So the strategy map, maybe I wouldn't show it to all my employees because it might be overwhelming, but I do want to articulate to them how their work contributes to the financial success and the customer satisfaction and internal business processes. Because if they can see how their work contributes to the overarching goals, if they can understand and agree on that, then they'll be much more motivated to do their job. If you think about, some of us might have had jobs where we're just told to do something and we have no idea why we're doing it, and it seems kind of pointless. It's very demotivating. But if you can see the bigger picture of why what you're doing is important, then you're much more motivated to do it. So, all right. We'll jump back to this for 1 second. I really just wanted to compare these two. This is our cascading kind of like planning from chapter 5. It has the same hierarchical structure. The takeaway is that there should be clear connection from the top-down goals and the bottom-up processes. Does that make sense? Okay. Let's talk about total quality management. First thing we'll talk about, there are 2 ways to measure control. If we're looking at products, we might do quality control. So if you think of an assembly line, quality control might be randomly picking off one part from the conveyor belt and inspecting it for quality. And as long as we sample 5% of our product and everything looks good, then we assume that the rest of the 95% is good as well. That would be quality control. Bless you. There's also quality assurance, which is more about assessing the quality of employee performance. So I think I told you how our lifeguard company would do random lifeguard tests. We would show up to the pool, they wouldn't expect it, and we would watch how they scan their zone. We time how long it takes them to scan their full zone and take an average. We might throw a mannequin in the pool and see if they can rescue the mannequin. If we're assessing performance like that, that would be an example of quality assurance. Okay, these two terms are actually very common in organizations, so we should know what they mean. All right. Here is a guy named Deming from way back when. He suggested a couple things about quality control that are very popular. The first, he suggested that quality should be aimed at the needs of the customers. So if you remember our midterm question, like who should you care about the most? It's your customers and their needs. If you can do that, then you can ensure a quality product because it'll be a product that people want to use. Companies and leaders should aim at improving the system, not blaming workers. A pretty common issue with organizations is that when things don't go well, they like to blame the employees, and they forget to sometimes make sure that the employees like have what they need to be successful, that they were told the right things. So don't just blame the employees. See if there's a way to fix the system. Improved quality. Improved quality leads to increased market share, increased company prospects, and increased employment. So if your product is good, you'll be successful as an organization. And then he also suggested this PDCA cycle. You want to guess how many steps are in the PDCA cycle? There are 4. Yes, and you want to guess if it loops on itself? It does. This is our PDCA cycle. I kind of like this one actually because it's very simple, maybe overly simple, but it says we could plan, do, check, and act to maintain control of our quality. So it's very similar to our control process. We're basically setting standards, then checking to see if we met our standards, and then taking action if we did not. So that's our PDCA cycle. All right. This is becoming a popular term, total quality management, or TQM. So this is a comprehensive approach to control. A couple key principles here. This is led by top management. It is supported throughout the organization, so there's buy-in. And it has 2 focuses, so people orientation and improvement orientation. Okay, so we're going to try to empower our employees, serve our customers, and also continuously improve our work processes. So we'll spend the next few slides talking about TQM. First of the 2 principles is their people orientation. So they treat customer value as the most important. It assumes that if people are given empowerment, they will inherently want to work towards improving quality. And it also emphasizes training, so continuous training, the necessity of teamwork, and also cross-functional efforts. It's like it's a collaborative effort. So my question is, if you can remember theory X and theory Y from chapter 2, does theory X and theory Y ring a bell for y'all? Okay. Do you remember which perspective this aligns with? Yeah, that's right. Zuccotter says theory Y, and he's correct. Do you remember theory Y says that people inherently want to work hard? If we just give them some empowerment, they will do the right thing. Theory X says people will not do the right thing, that they're lazy, and you have to control them. So clearly, especially if you look at the second bullet point, TQM is focused on theory Y. So let's give people empowerment and trust that they're going to want to produce a quality product. All right, so that's people orientation. There's also improvement orientation. A couple takeaways here. So it's less expensive to do things right the first time. That's very true. It's better to make small improvements all the time. That's also very true. If you think about companies that don't plan very well, they just say like, all right, we'll figure things out. Like, what's the worst that can happen? Then they make a bunch of costly mistakes. And if they just would have spent some time planning and having some forethought, they could have like done things right the first time. You can also avoid very costly improvements if you make small improvements over time. Have y'all ever heard of the principle like putting a Band-Aid? Well, maybe I shouldn't say the full phrase. The phrase is like put a Band-Aid over a turd. And the idea is that if you have a turd, something that is really bad, and you just put a Band-Aid over it, that doesn't fix the problem. There was one company we worked with, or one client we worked with in Louisiana. Their pool hadn't been updated in 20 years, and the pumps were going out, and their plaster, like the pool wall, was coming off. It was always cloudy. The systems were broke. And a total overhaul would have cost them a lot of money. Instead of fixing things, they made like really small improvements. So like we're gonna paint the pool this year. That'll fix the issue with how it looks. And I have some plumbing background, so I can take a look at that pump. Maybe I can fix the pump instead of hiring a plumber. So they did things like that. And then 2 years down the line, the repair bill was twice as much as it was to begin with. So the takeaway from that story was if you make small improvements or you like just eat the costs as they come up, as opposed to kicking it down the road, it'll always be cheaper in the long run. All right, let's see. Accurate standards must be followed to eliminate small variations, and there must be strong buy-in from top management. So if there's not support from your upper management, it's not going to work. All right, so those are the two aspects of TQM. Let's look at some specific applications of TQM. And a few things that organizations will do if they're using this, they might outsource more. We learned about outsourcing in an earlier chapter, but essentially I might subcontract some work. I might pay someone else to do it for me. That in general reduce costs for organizations and tends to have a positive effect on their outcomes. I might try to reduce cycle times by maybe eliminating discrepancy or what's what I'm looking for? Inefficiencies. So as an example, I might try to have fewer authorization steps during a contract to make things more efficient. And then last, I might use statistical process control, which is the same thing as quality control, just with them some statistical determination. It's like I have a random number generator that tells me pick off every third product off the line, check it out, and then put it back on, make sure it is good. All right, a couple other practices associated with TQM. Have you heard of Six Sigma before? Or Lean Six Sigma? That's becoming more popular, and I think for a lot of y'all, it might be required by your employer. I know for a lot of CBA students, they get a job and they're told that they need to do Six Sigma training pretty early on. So it's worth checking out. It's basically like a professional development workshop where you learn about project management for one thing. So if you're going to be a project manager, it teaches you principles for maximizing efficiency. And there's a lot of control aspects baked into the Six Sigma course. So my recommendation with courses like that, you're probably going to get more out of college than you would these courses. If you like want to learn in all your classes, you'll learn more there. But you might consider this if it's one of the industry standards. So if you know that everyone going for your job is Six Sigma certified, you should probably also get Six Sigma certified. This video, I left it in there for you to watch optionally later on. It just describes what it is. The second thing up here is ISO, which is essentially a program where organizations can hire independent auditors to come evaluate them. And the independent auditor says, yes, things are looking good. So it's one way for organizations to have some sort of external agent confirm their success. Doesn't look great if the organization says, yeah, we're doing things great, but it helps if there's an external opinion. So there's actually, I think in some industries, if you're not ISO certified, people are not going to hire you to do work. So that would be considered an industry standard. All right, some takeaways from TQM research. It does help. All the research suggests that if you have TQM in your organization, it will increase performance. But there's a couple of things that are required. You have to have buy-in from your leadership. You have to have the ability to measure or track results of the program. So you can't just adopt TQM and then not evaluate its effectiveness. And then you should also facilitate a culture of quality or continuous learning. All right. Let's look at a couple contemporary control issues. So 2 contemporary control issues that are becoming increasingly important, AI and employee tracking and monitoring. What's interesting is this was written like before ChatGPT, so this is probably a little outdated. But the book suggests that AI can be useful for control for a couple reasons. It can help us reduce errors and defects, increase productivity, and enhance supply chain management. If you think of like supply chain management as being how can we distribute our product effectively, some organizations are adopting AI to come up with like ideal shipping routes and to maximize shipments, so go out in a certain way. It's much more efficient, obviously, than a human and less prone to error. All right. And the last issue is employee tracking and monitoring. Have you ever had an employer use any type of tracking or monitoring? What did y'all use, Norelli? Mm. Dang, that's a lot of tracking. Can y'all think of, so like obviously if we're tracking time it takes for someone to check someone out, that could help us increase like how quick people get checked out. Can y'all think of a potential downside to that? Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Customer service can go down, where we're trying to rush people through and customers like, what's going on? Are you trying to get me out of here? One example that came to mind for me, have y'all ever been to a fast food drive-through and they say, can you back up for me? Or can you pull forward into a spot and we'll bring your food out? The reason they're doing that, if you look inside, there's a timer behind the window and it's timing how long it takes to deliver your food. But if they have you pull forward, then the timer resets for the next person and your time was lower than it should have been. So all that to say, you can have these tight control processes, but you have to make sure that they don't lead to behavior like that that negatively influences customer service. There's some other examples of tracking and monitoring the book provides, like recording your employees with surveillance cameras. That can help in some situations. Like if you work at a bank, for example, you want some video cameras up there. But you have to make sure that it's clear that employees are being recorded. They are maintaining like transparency and ethics. And the same is true for like truck drivers have their trucks tracked for the same process. The key takeaways are that we make sure that employees understand that it's for their benefit. A lot of organizations use it to keep employees in line, and the research shows that employees tend to not like that. It can have negative effects, actually. So try to only use it for good purposes. All right. Let's look at our career readiness model. The skill for this week is career management, which isn't really related to control, but it's an important skill. So let's talk about a few ways to improve our career management. A couple ideas here. First, make every day count, especially in college, in your first few years out of college. The more hard work you put in, the more beneficial, the more benefits you're going to see in your career. I think we talked about wildly important goals before. Does that term ring a bell? It's one of the books I mentioned, 4DX, 4 Disciplines of Excellence. It's very popular in organizations. They say that if you focus on your wildly important goals every day, as opposed to letting the daily whirlwind take over your focus, make some progress on your WIGs and you'll be more satisfied in the long run. Stay informed, network, put yourself out there, promote yourself, especially if you're introverted, not very sociable. Practice putting yourself out there in social situations. Roll with change and disruption. So work on your openness to experience. That's one of our big 5 personality traits. Try to be flexible. That's one of the most valued skills by employers is flexibility. During your interview, I think in general, CBA students are pretty good about this, but like take interviews seriously, dress up. Even if you don't like, obviously in college, it's hard to have a lot of money to spend on clothes, but like you can go to Goodwill and find some decent dress clothes. Make sure they're clean and they fit, and that's going to go a long way. First impressions make a huge difference in interviews. Be honest and demonstrate EI, emotional intelligence. All right, then last suggestion here, use technology for self-development and creating good habits. So, okay, so those are ways we can advance our career readiness. Let's do the self-assessment, and then we'll discuss. What do you mean? Oh yeah, it's like in general perceptions. Yeah. All right, got any more time with this? Or are we good? All right, so let's discuss briefly. I know this doesn't have a lot of relevance to control or the class in general. I actually originally assigned this thinking it would be different and realized the first semester it's not really great in terms of applicability, but it leads to some interesting questions that I like hearing from y'all. So my first question for y'all, well, let me get the PowerPoint going again. So what do your professors do or do not do in general that prevents you from getting the most out of your courses? So things you either like or really dislike that professors do. Mari?
Read the slides, my behavior.
That's good. If y'all want to say things I'm not doing well, you can do that. I don't care. So Mari says, like, people read the slides and you also can't hear what they're saying. Obviously, that makes things tough. What else, Joel? Yeah, that's cool. That's helpful. Cyrus?
Including you, make class really enjoyable. Yeah, that's what it is also. pretty easy to understand.
Cool. Thanks, Cyrus. Appreciate that. All right, what you got? Yeah, I get that. When I was in grade school, my class got told every year we were the worst class I ever had. And that's not very motivating. All right. Yeah, all right, Mike. That's good to know. All right. Anything else teachers do? Rebecca? I know. It's not the best. McGraw Hill's not the best. All right, Riley. One more about teachers. Seen that. I think in Monty's class after this, right? You're in the computer class after? He like types out everything he says. That was hard to watch. All right. Enough about professors. How about UIC in general? What does UIC do or do not do that helps you get the most out of your college experience? I don't know. Sorry? Your advisors? Wait, they're good or they're bad? Thanks. Sorry to hear that. What else? Aside from advisors, Cyrus? Yeah. Yeah, UPass is nice. All right, let's focus a little bit longer. Anything else UIC does for us, good or bad? Carissa? Parking, is it good or bad? Oh. Yeah. How, just by show of hands, who commutes? I commute. Yeah, it's a pretty commuter heavy school. So you think they'd have better parking situations? I will say, to Cyrus's point, I like the UPass. So I UPass in. All right, here's a question I really wanted to know about. Question for y'all. What are you doing or not doing that helps you or prevents you from getting the most out of your college experience? Mike? Not putting yourself out there? All right, well, that's an easy fix. Cyrus, what do you got? Nice. Yeah. Yeah, that helps a lot. So I'm going to come to you, Arlette. Do you do a lot of like student orgs? Do you do any student orgs? Yeah. I thought y'all would have said that for what UIC does well, because I see a lot of student orgs on campus. You got to try. Arlette, what were you going to say? Yeah. Coming from, I went to an SEC school. Sports are a pretty big deal. There's a lot of identity based around the football team. All right. Anything else we think we could do to improve our odds, Norelli? Yep, that makes a huge difference just going to class. All right. The reason I wanted to ask these questions, I think it's interesting thing about like, obviously there are things that hold us back. Our professors sometimes aren't the best. Our advisors sounds like are usually really bad. So that sucks. But at the same time, we have to take some personal accountability for our own success. So given your constraints that are placed on you by UIC and faculty, there are things you can do to maximize your chance of success. So something to think about. All right. That's all I want to talk about today. Let's do attendance. Remember, group papers we do on Sunday night at midnight. And first presentations are next Tuesday. So, Yikes. When or what? The night before. The night before you present. Yep. All right. Have a good weekend. If you need to, yeah. That's a big quote. To put the year here, so like 2022. You're in 2022, page 23. First feature, that's good. These are all strengths, right?
Yeah.
Like good strengths. The only thing that I'm not seeing right now, like this quote's really good. See if you can apply something about this to one of your strengths. Because like this is a strength because it helps them advance. I don't know, being more quality or efficient or being responsive to customers. Like make an explicit connection between what you're drawing from on the book and the points you're making in your write-up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yep. Good luck.
Thank you.
What's up?
I was wondering, like, with free.
Do you see the extra credit column in there? You just add, that's all you do. Yeah. What's that? You want me to verify that for you? All right. Tell me what were you gonna ask? You should look presentable. There's no dress code, but you should look presentable. Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah, business casual is good.
Let's see.
Yeah, what's up?
I did cite, but.
Technically, no.
Because like I did get it from their direct website.
The only thing that has to have a book citation is the SWOT section. So one strength, one weakness, one opportunity. So if you're just doing intro and conclusion, you're good.
So for the intro, I did find sources to say when it began, when the company got founded. Right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah, that's good. That's sources
not
you'll
from
need.
me, right? That's from
Correct.
someone else. So I did cite it.
That's good. That's what you're supposed to do. Yeah, 90. 0.67. Yeah, technically rounds up to 91. So
Wait, what?
you're technically round up to 91.
91?
Yeah.
Oh,
Keep going.
yeah. It's because like I don't want to get a B in this class.